Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'd like to discuss a comment from the UK Treasury which is causing a little bit of consternation as the government seeks to persuade us that poorly paid workers shouldn't get pay rises to meet the rising cost of living, because apparently that's bad. It's not only immoral, but it's economically ridiculous as well. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So let's take a little step back and look at the situation. The country is experiencing massive inflation and actually a contraction in growth. We're now looking at 11% inflation this year and no growth, according to the Bank of England's latest figures. Boris Johnson, just over half a year ago, told us that inflation was not going to be a problem. Now it's the highest it's been in just over 40 years, back when a different lunatic Tory was stuffing our economy. But then Boris Johnson also said there'd be no such thing as tank battles in Europe anymore. The government tried to convince people that inflation is on the up everywhere, and indeed it is. Absolutely it is. But comparable economies in Europe have nothing like the runaway inflation and really low growth of the UK. The only comparable economy even close is the United States, which has got a similar issue of poor production but for different reasons. Like, our inflation rate is double that of France. But also, although France have got an inflation rate of just over 5% at the moment, they've got growth of like 2.7% forecast for this year. We've got growth of like nothing. So the effective inflation, if you deduct growth from it, we've effectively got 4 times the inflation expected than compared to France. So although you can say inflation is a significant problem everywhere, we would bite your hand off to have the inflation and growth of France, Germany or Italy. Then there's the pound. This has been weakening of late. Something entirely down to us, of course, because the strength of a currency is a direct competition with others. You can't say a currency is going down all over the world. It's ridiculous. It's in direct competition with other currencies. Now, I've not personally been that alarmed, because if you look at the trends over the past few years, it goes up and down, buffeted around by Brexit and other things. But it hasn't exactly collapsed. That being said, it is still a worry in the here and now, because in the here and now we are in a financial crisis. Because Brexit means our production is falling, we have to import more. Our import of goods is very high. Leaving the single market and imposing an immigration policy that shuts out essential workers means lots of businesses can't find workers. We have got more vacancies in Britain than there are unemployed people in Britain. And the unemployed are generally not in the same place as the jobs anyway. That's why they're unemployed. So we can't produce as much, but we still want the product. So we have to buy them from somewhere, so we import more. But if our currency is weaker, that's a problem, because it means we're paying more for those goods. Someone could sell us something for like €5 or whatever, but because the pound is weakening, it costs us more. It's the same price for them. They're still selling it for €5 this year as they did last year, but we're paying more in pounds. And what it means is, if those goods are more expensive to us, it means more inflation. And it's against this background that I refer you to this message from Simon Clarke, a Tory MP and Chief Secretary to the Treasury. He made the argument that the government have been trying to make, that they are deliberately suppressing people's wages in order to control inflation. In other words, they're taking the sensible step to keep our wages low. But it's economic nonsense. First of all, when you look at our inflation right now, what is it down to? Is it down to high wages? This high wage economy that Boris Johnson promised Brexit would deliver? No. Public sector wages have been kept low all the time. Private sector wages are always higher, but that's not been linked as an issue in this inflation spiral. Basically the government just don't want to talk about wages. Now they think they've got an excuse, so they can boast about poorly paid workers not being able to afford to pay the bills. But the causes of our inflation are mainly down to these points. First, the government removed all COVID restrictions without considering the sudden shift in demand for energy, food and other goods. Boris Johnson said, the reason we've got problems at the moment, a bit of economic contraction, is because we came out of COVID too well. No, it's because we came out of it too poorly. Remember when we had initial shortages in the supermarkets during the first lockdown? Part of it was panic buying, all those people with the trolleys full of toilet rolls. But part of it was people needing to buy more food because they'd be eating all of their meals at home for a time. There'd be no like having lunch at work or going out to restaurants now and then. You were going to be eating everything at home pretty much. It meant a sudden disruption to the supply chain. Restaurant supply chains weren't needed so much. So the stuff that was being sold to restaurants, they didn't need it anymore. And supermarket supply chains needed to be beefed up. Well, there was a similar sudden and completely unplanned shift at the end of the COVID restrictions as well. Sudden changes to the food supply chains, demand for more fuel at petrol stations, energy in both the office and the home because people would be at home as well as going into the office. The government did nothing to get us ready or to phase it in. The second impact was the attempted increase in production. You know, we rely on materials and components from elsewhere. We have to import them in. But because those other countries were also trying to ramp up their production at the same time, because COVID affected the world, we weren't able to get all the materials and components needed in the quantities required for us to step up production. And when supply is low, the prices go up. So that was another massive source of inflation. Third, Brexit has made it more expensive to sell our goods abroad, so we're making less money in real terms as a country. You know, I keep seeing a lot of nonsense on the channel from people poking their heads out in their Brexit echo chamber to tell me, official figures say that our exports to the EU are at record highs, which is what Boris Johnson said last week. The thing is, they're referring to a report that has this chart on it. Does this chart look like it's a record high? No, it's still below pre-COVID levels for goods. Now, this is the ONS report that they think they're citing, but have not actually read. Overall trade is higher because of services, but services have only started to be hit by Brexit because of COVID travel restrictions. It meant Brexit actually covered those up for a bit. The picture's going to be rather different next year. The reality is we're not able to export as much because of the trade barriers we've erected. We also can't produce as much because we've shut ourselves off from a massive labour market. All large economies need huge numbers of migrant workers, every single one. There's not a single advanced economy in the world that exists just on its own domestic workforce. So because we're having to import more goods, which you can see from this ONS report is basically reaching record levels again, we have to pay more for them. And that's quite aside from the weakening pound. Even if the pound weren't particularly weak, the fact that we're importing more means we're going to be paying more anyway. You know, those are the reasons for our high inflation. Obviously now we have another one in the form of a war in Europe. The impact on food prices at least will be significant. And those were already going up alarmingly. The point is you do not see any economic reports blaming our inflationary problems on high pay. There's various factors in there. The Bank of England have said there's various factors in there. The factors I've gone over. I'm not making these factors up. That's what you see in the economic reports, the official economic reports. I would also point out that under the last Labour government, incomes increased in real terms by 25%. That includes the years after the global crash. It was even higher if you just take the ones before it. But that means the last Labour government left people with 25% more income above the rate of inflation. So in real terms, when they eventually lost power. Since then, the Tories have crushed it. It's not just that people haven't seen the same rate of growth. The average income in the UK is now lower in real terms than when they took office. Under Labour, 25% higher. Under the Tories, as of last year, 7.5% lower. But this year, it's going to be ridiculous. And it was lower even before the pandemic hit. It's not even just the pandemic you get to blame. It was lower then. It's now a painful pay cut that the country has taken. And Labour did not bring with their high growth in incomes, high inflation as well. It's not like, you know, because I say it is a balance. If you have high inflation, you can get away with it if you've got high growth. You know, am I saying that? Did we get high growth but also high inflation? No, we got low inflation. Because until the market started to get ready for its big blow, it was below 2%. Labour are having year on year below 2%. 2% is the target set even by the Tories. But in their 12 years in power, they've only managed it once. They've only had inflation below 2% once in those 12 years. The economic reality, backed up by the figures, is that Labour brings pay increases with low inflation. The Tories bring pay reductions with high inflation. This is incontrovertible fact. This is not empirical thinking. This is fact. We can see it in the data. We've got a dozen years of Labour government. We've got a dozen years of Tory government to compare. Labour in power for 13 years. I've used this spreadsheet before. It shows that even taking inflation into account, the people of this country saw an average increase of 24.69% in their incomes, above the level of inflation. That's 25% increase in real terms. With the Tories in power, as the pandemic hit, it was already a 2.4% reduction in real terms. That meant that without any global shocks to the financial systems, they still shrunk our incomes in real terms. It got worse. It's getting worse still. Goodness knows what this spreadsheet will look like come the next election. And I won't be able to say just how bad it even is this year until the data is in next year. But public sector pay has increased by an average of less than 2%, with many workers getting pay freezes. MPs have had a pay increase that is above average for the public sector. No surprise there. Said it before. I've no issue with MPs getting decent pay. I'm not one of these that says, oh, they get paid too much. They don't get paid too much. Arguably, they don't get paid enough. But they should receive percentage increases in line with the lowest increases in the public sector to show some small measure of solidarity. Link it with the lowest increases and see if that motivates them to pay more attention to the economy. So this comment from the Treasury Minister is nonsense. Economists know it's nonsense, and the pay increase and inflationary data comparing this Tory government with the last Labour government shows it to be nonsense as well. And I do hope Labour makes these points as we build up to the next election. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships. And until next time, I'll see you later.